Amyloid beta deposition remotely determines glucose hypometabolism within the default mode network. The default mode network was obtained in 203 healthy elderlies using cross-correlation FDG uptake maps. This metabolic network includes the precuneus, posterior cingulate, inferior parietal, lateral temporal, and medial prefrontal cortices. We then tested the links between amyloid beta aggregation and hypometabolism within and without default mode network nodes. We found that amyloid beta aggregation in the precuneus correlates with hypometabolism in the posterior cingulate, inferior parietal, and lateral temporal cortices, but not within the precuneus. We also found that amyloid beta aggregation in the posterior cingulate remotely correlates with hypometabolism in the precuneus, inferior parietal, and lateral temporal cortices, but not within the posterior cingulate. Amyloid beta aggregation in the lateral temporal cortex remotely correlates with hypometabolism in the posterior cingulate, precuneus, and inferior parietal cortices, but not within the lateral temporal cortex. Amyloid beta aggregation in the inferior parietal cortex remotely correlates with hypometabolism in the posterior cingulate, precuneus, and lateral temporal cortices. In addition, amyloid beta aggregation in the medial prefrontal cortex remotely correlates with hypometabolism in the posterior cingulate, precuneus, inferior parietal, and lateral temporal cortices, but not within the medial prefrontal cortex. It's important to mention that amyloid beta aggregation in the anterior cingulate, orbitofrontal, superior parietal, insula, and occipital cortices, shown as gray nodes, did not correlate with the default mode network hypometabolism. Taking these observations together, one can conclude that within the default mode network, amyloid beta aggregation associates with hypometabolism with distant rather than the same network node.